If you think about it, we spend approximately 1/3 of our lives working. We spend almost 1/2 of our waking lives working. So it's no small issue. And the Bible has a lot to say about work and about business. It's a major issue with God. And so let me share with you 5 laws, 5 principles or 5 laws that will lead to a fruitful life, a fulfilled life, and a life of impact. And we may have 2 or 3 of these, maybe 4 of them, employed in our lives, but we need to endeavor to have all 5 of these incorporated and working in our life. Which brings us to the 4th law. It's the law of right motives. And the law of right motives says this: right motives bring purpose to the heart and peace to the mind. Right motives bring purpose to the heart and peace to the mind. Look at Proverbs 23 with me, if you would. Verse 4. It says, "Do not overwork to be rich. Because of your own understanding, cease." Verse 5, God's question. "Will you set your eyes on that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings. They fly away like an eagle toward heaven." And we said, will you set your eyes? Literally, will you set your desire on that which is not? In other words, if laboring to you is just about the money, you've lost the plot. If you're just working, even working hard, just for the money, you're missing the main deal. You see, our work should be 2 things. Number 1, it should be an expression of our passion and an extension of who we are. And number 2, it should be for the glory of God. An expression of our passion, an expression and extension of who we are. Because we're all wired up uniquely and differently, and we all have been given certain talents and gifts through which we can be a blessing to others and by which we should be able to make a living. I believe that's God's way. And whatever you're called to do, whatever your work is, it should be an extension of that. And you may not be there now. Give yourself completely to it. Pay the bills. But find out who you are and then begin to move towards that. I think it's God's way. And I think it's just a mistake sometimes. People, they cordon off their life. They compartmentalize. Well, okay, I got work that I hate. And when I get off work, then I start to live. That's where my life happens. Or I got my church life and I got my, recreational life and I got work. No, it's just life. That's it. And if you don't start living until the whistle blows at 5 o'clock, something's wrong. You ought to be just as eager to get up in the morning to go to work as you are, to get involved in your recreation thing. And I know we all have times of boredom and tedium, but for the most part, it should be an extension of who we are. We're living, whether we're at work, whether we're with our family, or whether we're out on the golf course, whatever we're doing. I thought I was preaching good. I don't know. All right, secondly, our work should be for the glory of God. Whatever we do, we should do for the glory of God, the Scripture says. Colossians 3:23 says, "Whatever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not to men." H.A. Ironside, famous theologian, back in, I think in the 20s, he was working as a young man for a cobbler, a Christian shoe cobbler. And Harry Ironside's job was to take the leather out of the water after it had been soaking and to pound it with a mallet so that it would stretch, and to pound it until it had dried. And then that leather, after it had dried, after he'd pounded and pounded it, would be nailed to the shoes. And he said it was boring, and sometimes he hated doing it, and he just didn't look forward to it. And there was another cobbler down the street that was not a Christian man. In fact, he was pretty notorious for some of the things he was involved in. And Harry would look in his window sometimes and notice that he just took the leather wet, and didn't pound it and stretch it and dry it. He just nailed it onto the shoes wet. And he ventured into the other cobbler's store one day and asked him, he says, I noticed you notice the leather, you pound the leather on while it's wet. He says, is it better? And the other cobbler gave a cynical smile and says, no, but this way the shoes come back a lot faster. In other words, they begin to tear and different things happen and they have to be brought back in and repaired. And so he gets more business by doing shoddy work. And so Harry thought he'd learned something. And he went to the Christian cobbler guy that he worked for and told him, says, maybe we're wasting our time, pounding the leather out and letting it dry. And the cobbler, whose name was Dan, immediately went and got his Bible, opened it up to Colossians 3:23. Whatever you do, Do it as unto the Lord. Do it heartily as unto the Lord and not unto men. And he said this. He said, Harry, listen. I don't repair shoes. I don't do what I do for the money that I get. He said, I do it for the glory of God. He said, one day when I stand before the judgment seat of Christ, I expect to see a huge pile of shoes there. He said, and I don't want the Lord to look at me and frown and say, Dan, you didn't do a good job. You didn't give it your best. He said, I want to see Him smile and say, well done, good and faithful servant.